Welcome, everybody. My name is Nick Torres, and welcome to the How to Hand Build a Goblet Cup Workshop. And I'm so happy you guys are here. I'm so very excited. And for those that don't know me, my name is Nick Torres, and I run the Shaping Your Pottery podcast, how potters like yourself discover your own unique voice with your pottery. And one of the best ways to do that is to simply learn directly from other potters. And that's why I'm so excited Mike here has agreed to do a workshop with me. And he's going to be teaching all about his step-by-step process on how he creates a goblet cup using slabs and his templates that he creates for everyone. If you don't know Mike creates some amazing pottery, some hand-built pottery. He also sells his templates as well for anybody to use as well. So here's the plan for today. So this is going to be about an hour and a half long, around there. Mike's going to teach you his process. He's going to go into great detail into the tools he uses and everything he does to create his pottery, and he creates his templates and how he creates a goblet cup as well. With that in mind, I'm going to let Mike take it from here, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. I'm really excited to be able to do a workshop here in my basement, so I hope you don't mind the dungeon vibes. But, really excited to share this aspect of my process. I'm just going to go ahead and jump in. I figured I would start by showing the templates that I use. So I'm going to flip my video around here. Try to anyway. Give us a bird's eye view. This template is the base goblet template that we're going to be talking about today, and it comes out to be this form. So it's got a pentagonal kind of belly section, round rim, and a conical foot. I've added a drainage hole here for the foot so that when it's gone through the dishwasher or it's sitting in the dish rack, it doesn't fill up with water, in case you're wondering about that. But with these templates, I've also made customized versions of things with my designs, right? So I sell the solid templates on my website. These ones I make for myself, but you could do similar things with like leather hole punches to cut out patterns, things like that. So this one, for example, created this goblet. I used a different section for the foot, but the cutouts create this low relief. All right. I also just wanted to show y'all the various tools that I use. Ooh, can't quite get far enough over. I use in my practice because I only use so many things, but I use them over and over. My template because it's not sharp, but it glides really nicely, or just a really broad is not always the best. I also have a mallet. I've made this one myself so that the handle has some room for when I'm hitting the slab. I've always been frustrated with mallets where it's right in line with the handle and you end up hitting your knuckles. Stamp, various ribs. I use a serrated rib for all of my scoring. A cheese cutter. I use this for rims and things. And then some brayers, some wind rollers. Alrighty. Now I've gotten all of that out of the way. And I am forgetting one thing. I also use some wooden sticks. These are just 1/4-inch pieces of pine. You could use like yard sticks. Those work quite well. And I use these for the formation of my slabs, which is what I'm going to get right into now. So for my slabs, I use a method a lot like perhaps making slabs of cheese. So I want to start with a block. I've got a bag of clay here. So hopefully I'm fully in the frame. Yep, there we go. So I've got this bag of clay here and a pretty broad block. And what I'm going to do is just slam this block on the ground to make it a shape that accommodates this form. So I want to get it large enough to fit this template. Just like you would when you're throwing a slab, throwing it directionally is going to help to stretch it out. But by keeping it in this bag, I can lift it up and move it around and not really worry about getting my hands all dirty or the space all dirty. And if it starts to get kind of stretched out and tight, I can pick the plastic up, kind of release it from the surface of the clay, and then seal it back down. and continue to throw. So now I've got this pretty flattened block of clay here, and it's just about the exact size that I need. And really, I'm just making this block large enough to accommodate that template, because once I cut these slabs, they're going to be pretty close to the thickness that I need. So I'm not going to have too much room to kind of stretch it out and increase the size of my slab to fit the template. Getting the plastic off afterwards is always a little bit of a struggle from the stretching. But I find that by just kind of peeling it from one edge and getting it around to the corners, once it's kind of over this first edge, it pops off pretty easy. Go over to the other side. Oh no. Now get these templates out of the way and set my block down. Now this is where my mallet comes in to really refine this block. You know, you can't really see it from the bird's eye view, but there's kind of a lift here where the block has gotten kind of deformed from being taken out of the bag. So I'm just going to slam this around the edges, kind of get it all flattened up so that my slabs are generally uniform. You might notice kind of a twisty motion as I'm hitting. You know, this is a flat spot and it's a pretty moist block of clay. So if I hit it straight on and pull it straight away, I'm going to be forming a vacuum and it's going to have difficulty pulling away, and eventually I'll end up kind of ripping clay off. So instead, I'm kind of peeling my mallet off with a little bit of a twist. So it's a slap and a twist. So that way I can work a bit faster and not worry about getting clay all on my mallet here. Hopefully the camera is not too shaky. All right. And then I like to do it on the sides as well. They're kind of rounded, kind of a mushroom top from being whacked. And so inevitably the slices of cheese that I'm going to cut, the slabs, will not be the same size because the slabs at the bottom will be skinnier because it's kind of mushroomed over. And that's every edge, and then back on the top. Now in doing this, it's also really attached this block to the table, right? Without peeling it up, it's not going to slide around, which for the next step is actually quite nice. You know, usually when I'm making multiples of a thing, and that's a lot of the reason I use these templates, right? I can make the same goblet form with like as many patterns as I want, and so I can put them all on the slabs and make them all at the same time. So I want a lot of slabs to accommodate the repeated form. So I do that by using these sticks and slicing through. Oftentimes people have some difficulty getting through the block. There's a lot of tension from the wire tugging through the clay. You know, if you've got grog, that's going to be more so. So my advice to that is don't go perfectly horizontal, you know, perfectly perpendicular to your clay or your sticks here. Think of it more like a guillotine or a mandolin, I think, the cooking thing to slice. Because if you're going in at this angle but moving down straight along the strips, it'll cut one side first and then the other, and so it'll have less friction. So I'm just going to get it taut with my fingers, just a space long enough that I can glide my thumbs along these strips of wood. And then I'm going to move one thumb in, kind of starting that guillotine angle, and then start slicing through. I like to clean off my wire, just kind of squeegeeing it like this, and then removing some strips of wood, one from either side, and then wiring through again. Now, as I do this, I find it very important to not only keep the wire taut, but also make sure that my thumbs are gliding along and pressing along this wood. You know, if I kind of lift up my thumbs, or maybe the wood is warped or something like that, I'm going to end up with a slab that has some undulation that isn't completely even. And And I've got these nice flat sticks, so I might as well make a nice flat slab. So just in this process. So this is a really quick way of making slabs. And something that I find really nice about it is, slabs made on like a slab roller or with a rolling pin, because they're rolled out, the particles are really laid down and kind of in one direction, and oftentimes that causes some warping. But with this method, they're being really slammed down directly. And so there's a lot of compression happening. So my slabs generally stay flat if I want them flat, or stay curved if I want them curved. So I just kind of used my palm here to get some friction on the edge. And I'm just lifting up on the back side of this block. Set side. You can see that I definitely didn't do the best job on wedging. That's okay, because as long as the clay moisture is all even, these little air bubbles are not going to bother me too much, because I'm going to smooth it out and you won't see them. There's a common misconception or a mistaught rule in ceramics that air bubbles are going to mean an explosion, but it does not. So long as you allow your pots to dry fully, it's no issue at all. All right, so now I just go in and I peel away each of these slabs. It's very moist here. It's been kind of a wet, stormy day, so my clay is a little bit more wet than I would like. Other than a little bit more flexibility, that's not too much of an issue. Goodness. So I'll just peel all these away, and I just restack them. I'm setting them just to the side here because I want to stay on the video, but I have a damp box that I set them in after I've wired them off. And in that way, I can keep slabs usable for quite some time. And even if the slabs kind of gain a certain level of stiffness from staying in that damp box, usually if I use this large scraping tool, which right now I'm just using to try and get this slab off, which, there we go. If I use it on the slabs in the damp box and just kind of run across it, kind of recompressing, just like a bag of porcelain, oftentimes that'll wake it up and allow me to use the slab as if it was fresh. There's this, there we go, making sure it's nice and centered. There's this belief that you need to wedge your clay after it's been sitting in a bag for a long time, right? And that is generally for the wheel. And that's because, just like what happens in the damp box, the particles are kind of settling within one another. And so that wedging helps to re-jostle them, and in this case, wake it up. So I'm now going to take my mega scraper here, and I'm just going to use it to squeegee and smooth and compress the surface of this slab. If I have any like pocket areas, things that were like air bubbles or something, I'll just add a little bit more clay. Like I said, it's really wet, so I don't have to worry about like slipping or scoring or anything. It's gonna stick. And I'll just do that until it's all nice and flat. The really harsh lighting in my basement allows me to see air bubbles by kind of turning at an angle and looking at it from the side. You can't see it, but I'm kind of cocked over like this. And so from this angle with the harsh light, just looking at any little pimply spots and taking my knife and going in at an angle and then lifting it up so that I kind of make a flap, and then I'll push the air out of that flap and squish it down. So just finding all those and then squishing the air out of the flap. There's a little guy right there. Pushing it down. And then going back in again with my nice mega scraper here. And now all of those air bubbles are all gone. And I didn't wedge this bag of clay. It's just straight reclaim that I homogenized. All right. So now that I have this first side cleaned up and smoothed, I'm going to go ahead and attach my template. So in the case of this solid template, I've got this set. And for the solid templates, the textured templates, right, it kind of holds on to the clay. So I don't have to worry too much about adding moisture. But you can see how dry this tar paper has gotten. It's got some clay dust and stuff on it because it's been used before. But that clay dust is going to kind of keep this template from sticking. I'm going to apply the template and I want it to stay on this slab through the whole process. So to make sure that that happens, I'm going to just spritz this with water. I'm going to do it kind of off to the side here so I'm not spraying my table, but I just want to mist all of this. So I've gotten it pretty wet, you can see. Now I'm just going to rub that water in. And this is really only important for this kind of first use. If I was on to my second, third, however many goblets I'm making, I would not need to do this each time. It's just after it's been sitting and gotten all dry. I then also like to take a red rubber rib, vulcanized silicone, whatever the heck it is, and just get that excess water off because I just need enough that it is not bone dry, Right, there we go. So once I have that, I will place it on my slab, and that's where my wooden brayer comes in. I generally use this frustratingly squeaky but wide brayer to apply templates. And I do that because it really spreads out the pressure. Works well for these templates as well, but sometimes I've found if I have really tight little designs or really small things to get into spaces, I'll need to use my smaller brayer and really kind of work and focus on each little thing. All right. But for these solid ones, nothing to really worry about there. Just making sure that the template is attached fully to the slab. All right. Once I have that and I'm sure it's all attached, I'm going to peel my slab away from my cement board here. I forgot to talk about it when I said it here, but this is cement board. It's my favorite material to work on, and that's because it absorbs moisture so well. It's absorbent like plaster or drywall, but it's hard like wood, so I can use metal tools on it and not have to worry about getting plaster into my clay. If I was just doing this straight on canvas or on my wooden table, as I was rolling that template in, I probably would have made my slab so stuck to the table that getting it off would have been hard. So using this cement board really allows me to work more effectively and a lot quicker because I don't have to like peel things away. It just comes right off. All right. So then just smoothing out the backside again. And you might be able to see it. My view is teeny tiny, but you really can kind of see the shadow of the template. And I only really focus on compressing and smoothing until that full shadow is visible. And I don't worry about the edges because I'm going to cut them off anyway. All right, flipping it back over. And a lot of times, slab handling or slab building, people handle their slabs really gingerly. There's a lot of worry about things bending back and forth. What's really nice about this tar paper template on here is I can really pretty aggressively manipulate this slab, and the tar paper is going to hold it all together. So I don't have to worry about things like tearing as it bends or anything like that. All right. Now that I've gotten it attached and it's smoothed on both sides, I'm ready to go in and cut out the shape fully. So I'm going to take my needle tool, just like I mentioned, and I like to kind of bevel it. Man, there's such a bad glare on my phone. I like to kind of bevel it outward. So, if this, goodness, if this is the table, when I'm cutting everywhere but this edge, I keep it perpendicular. But when I'm on this edge, I kind of lean it out so that there's extra clay on the inside of the slab. So kind of leaning my needle tool out here, giving me extra on the side, and then standing it up and doing it straight up and down everywhere else. And I do that so that the edge that is that main joining edge has extra clay to really join and compress together. I do the same on the opposite side, kind of adding some extra clay on that side, and then I'll peel the excess clay away. All right, once I have that, I can go ahead now and flip my component back over. I like to do this for a number of reasons. It's a lot easier to score the edges when it's flipped over, but I also really enjoy adding my personal stamp on the insides of things. So like in the case of this goblet, and I put all these larger leaf shapes on the inside of the slab, and I did that while it was face down like this, and I stamped it so that as someone's drinking out of it, they get a unique experience that someone who isn't having that, intimate of an engagement with my pot would get. So going ahead and taking my stamp, get it nice and centered, and then I like to kind of rock it and do like a little circle. So I'm kind of like rolling, rocking it around in a little circle. And then at the very end, just a small little boop to get the very middle of the circle, because this is a fairly wide stamp. And I want to make sure that all of the letters, all the ER in my last name is fully legible. After that, it kind of pushes some clay out. There's always some displacement. However, whatever you're doing to the clay, there's going to be some kind of opposite equal reaction, all that science stuff. And so clay is getting displaced off to the side and making it no longer flat. So I'll just use the side of my stamp here to press that back down and make sure that it's all nice and flush on the inside, so that, anyone that might be concerned about washing the dishes doesn't need to be, because the glaze will fill in anything that might hold bacteria. So as I've been talking about bacteria, I'm just adding a little bit of water, using a brush. There's nothing special about this water, it's just plain old water. I'm using it, applying it onto the edge, and then going in with a serrated rib and pressing into the slab until I feel the template on the underside. So I'm kind of going in until I hit it, then I'm gliding against the template. And so in doing that, I am kind of making some extra seam here. A lot of times when people put slabs together, they'll add a coil on a seam so that there's a little bit of a bridge between the two connecting sides. And I found that by doing this, kind of displacing some of that clay, bringing that edge of the extra clay that I left when I cut it and bringing it up with the serrated rib, I found that that gives me enough extra clay that I basically have a coil built into the process. So I don't need to add another one, because sometimes when I'm doing a shape like this, getting down in with a coil is kind of a pain in the butt. All right, once I've got it nice and scored, and I've scored all of the edges except for the rim here. Moving a bit slower because I'm doing more talking than, so I'm gonna add a little bit more water. But if you were just kind of going full at it, not doing all these pauses, you might not need to add that extra brushing of water. And then I'm going to take my slab here, holding the tar paper side against my hands and my thumbs just over the edge a little bit, so it doesn't slide out of my hands. And I'm going to give it just a little bit of pushing this way with my thumbs, so bringing it in and bending it, kind of cup it into a cylinder. Sometimes it helps to kind of rock it, kind of roll this curve, just slowly bringing it until it kind of wants to sit at the shape where the edges are together, because right now it kind of wants to sit here. So I just want to keep kind of rolling it and working it down until it wants to kind of sit a little bit more closed. All right. There we go. So sitting much more closed. There's still a, because of gravity, it wants to fall, but staying more close. So now I'm going to go in and line up the rim here. I always make sure that the rim is what's flush. Sometimes templates kind of stretch. This is paper, and so it has some flexibility. So like, sometimes the bottom might get a little uneven. But I like to make sure that this rim is flush so that it's a nice level drinking edge. And then I'm just gonna go in, and I call it zippering because it always looks like a zipper to me. I'm just kind of compressing this edge. I'm holding on the sides here with the palm of my hand, kind of bringing it in and compressing with my thumbs on the tips here, kind of sliding along it to really compress this edge. And that's going to leave me with my two little burgery edges on the inside. And that's where I go back in now. And I've basically got that coil I was talking about. I like to set it on my table while I'm working on this part so that I can have the table be the back support. So I can't quite show exactly what I'm doing, but I'm basically just going to go zigzag across this to smear it to both sides. All right, make sure I'm nice and centered. Hold it nice and together, and then zigzag, smearing that extra clay back and forth. Okay, so we'll zigzag back and forth, and I'll flip it over and do the same thing from the bottom, rather than trying to reach my hand all the way down in. All right, and then I'm left with a fairly gnarly inside. As I've kind of rolled the slab, oh, there we go. You can kind of see like this bread texture where the inside has been kind of compressed and crunched and gotten these little rivulets. Now, if I leave those, the clay is more than likely going to go back to being a slab, or well, it's going to want to go back to being a flat slab. And that's going to end up meaning a crack here or some lack of roundness on the rim. So what I want to do is go in and smooth out all of that bread texture, those wrinkles, and smooth out the inside with a rubber rib or a metal rib, something like that. Again, I like to use the table surface, the surface of the table, as my back support as I work along the interior of this form. Being really conscious on the joined edge, that I'm not kind of stretching it out and causing it to tear. Because as I'm doing this, it's going to want to kind of spread this edge. I just want to make sure that that stays together because it'll be really difficult to get it to re-adhere if it comes apart. All right, and I'll just do that all on the inside until it's smooth to my liking. All right. For the sake of the demo, kind of speed forward, but I find kind of holding it from the backside, swiping away allows me a lot more control than trying to hold it up. I'm just rolling it as I go. All right. Put that to the side and I'll grab a banding wheel. I like to work on banding wheels as much as I possibly can anytime I'm working on something where I'm going to be doing like an action in the round. I teach a lot of hand building classes, and the amount of people that I see kind of moving around a spot, it's like the spot will move. So always use a banding wheel if you can, because let the tools work for you. Just setting it on there, getting it vaguely centered, and then I'll start to bring in these points. I like to kind of do it a little bit at a time, kind of like a flower blooming in reverse. So I'm kind of holding it and pinching a little bit on the edge here. I wonder if I can zoom. I cannot zoom. Okay. I'm just pinching along these corners at the kind of start of this join on each spike, and then working my way up further towards the edge of each spike, the tip of each triangle here, kind of squeezing away any extra clay that might seep out of these seams. Just working it all in towards the middle, a little bit at a time, as a team, as a group. We like to do things together. Support in community. That's why arches are so effective, that they kind of hold itself up. And the same thing happens with this kind of arched pentagonal form. As it gets built in, it's going to hold itself up. But if you try to push just two sides all the way together, they're going to want to come apart before the other ones join them. All right, so that's all cleaned on the outside. I'm still left with all that on the inside, and I could go in now, just like I did on the main seam, and clean all this extra boogery stuff out. So you can see with this light really shining on how quickly and haphazardly I've been smoothing, but just using a nice round tool here to smear this seam into the clay and make it look like it was one piece, rather than 5 pieces that came together. Then I just continue to do that all the way around. As I've been working, you can see that this just starting to come apart, which, honestly kind of good for the sake of a demo, because I can talk about that now. If your seams come apart, they're going to want to stay apart. If you just kind of like squish them back together, they'll just keep falling apart for whatever reason. And it's because it's not really scored up in here anymore. So rather than just squishing it back together, I'm going to take a little bit of water. I'm going to brush it in there. I'm going to take a sharp tool, just kind of bite into the wall a little bit on either side. And then I'm going to take some very squishy clay. So this is just clay that was like on the edge of my mega scraper, but whatever's on the edge of the mega scraper often is very soft and gooey. So I'm just going to roll that into a really nice small thin coil. And then I'll put that coil in that seam. Basically just giving it some new material to work with. Sometimes it's nice, kind of working off to the side here. Sometimes it's nice to kind of flatten one edge. It's teeny tiny little coil, but just flattening one little edge. Hopefully that comes through. And then laying that into the seam. All right, so just putting it in until it's all aligned and centered in there. So I'm just kind of doing this along the edge. And then I'll go back like I did when I was first joining this edge and recompress all of that back together. Letting that coil that I just put in kind of bridge that gap between the two and really allow a lot of nice, good, strong compression and joining between the two parts. All right, great. So that's where we're at now. I'm gonna kind of leave this one here for a little while. Just kind of setting it to the side. I'm setting it on its rim and just letting it homogenize, letting all of those seams that are more wet than the rest of the clay join to the same dryness, kind of homogenize some, and that will help it to stay together. I'm going to be adding a second piece to this, and if that piece is wanting to flail apart, then they're not going to stay together very well. So taking my time, letting things rest between actions. All right, now I'll go ahead and get my next slab. Goodness, I work in a basement, and bugs like to find their way in here, so there's a lot of flies and gnats and things that get a little caught in my slabs. Sorry if you're watching some insects stick to their doom under my mega scraper that I'm not noticing, but unfortunately it happens. Thankfully, they are just a small little organism, and so they'll burn out. I don't have to worry about my hair or anything like that. So I also don't have to worry about bugs, which is good because there's so many of them that find their way into my clay. I don't know what it's like for y'all, but if I leave bisque out, just kind of sitting with the opening up, I come back a few weeks later to find like just so many dead bugs, just like lit like a, a graveyard of bugs that have somehow found their way into the center of my bisqueware and dried out, I guess. I really don't know why it kills them, but always a lot of bugs in my bisqueware. All right, so this is that soft clay that I'm squeegeeing off. I always just keep it to the side because it really is just this like moist stuff. I don't pick up any of the grog that's in my clay or not as much. And so it's very flexible. So I just kind of keep that to the side. All right, and I've got my slab here cleaned again. I've got this piece. I'm going to use the textured one just to show the, different variety, but it's all basically the same. All right. So I'd apply this template because it's got the cutouts, the texture is going to hold on to the slab, keep it from kind of peeling away. And so I don't need to add the water like I did because the moisture that's in the clay is enough as is. But just like last time, I'm going to roll it on, flip it over, clean the back side. In the case of my cut out templates, I am a little bit more aggressive, more active when I am compressing this back side because I want to make sure that not only is the clay fully in the texture so that my low relief is there, but I want to make sure that it's all flush so that there's not like a high area and a low area in my low relief. My goal is to have like high spots and the crevices and all the high spots at the same level. So by really compressing it from this back side and pushing it, and as I push it, I can see more air bubbles come to the surface, and really pushing it to make sure that it goes fully into that texture and then becomes flush by the surface of the cement board. Cement board is also just really smooth. There's no like canvas texture. It's completely smooth. You can even sand it if you want it smoother, I suppose. But because it's so smooth, like this is a nice finished surface for this slab already. All right. So just like the body form, I'm going to cut the joining edges at a little bit of an angle, and then the top and bottom flush or straight up and down. Peel away the extra clay. All right. Then I can go back and flip it over. The foot, oftentimes people will be like, well, why not put the stamp in the foot? Sometimes I do. It's nice. But I find that having the opportunity to make handmade things, right? These, even if it's on the wheel, whatever, these are things made by hands. They're unique, they're one of a kind. So you have the opportunity to treat it like one of a kind art, right? It's a craft, but it's art. So you can do really fun things to that end, like adding a signature or adding a note inside of these things. I have to grab my tool. Wait just a second. Go. This one. So this is just a nice little round balled tip, two sizes. I like to use the big side. And then I can kind of write in this area. So Goblet Workshop with Nick Torres. Hopefully I've got that right. T-O-O or T-O-R-R-E-S. And then, I can kind of lay it at an angle so that when it's folded up, it looks level. So that when someone's using this, maybe the person drinking out of it doesn't see this, but the person cleaning the dish might. And then the person cleaning the dish, because they're always underappreciated, gets something unique and a little bit of a reward. So you could say like, I hate doing dishes. I wish this was in the dishwasher or something. Gives you an opportunity for something fun. All right. Just like the body, I'll add some water to the edges that I will be joining. I like to make sure that my serrated rib is clean. If the teeth are clogged, I won't get a good bite, nice deep serration. So I like to clean it between uses. And again, gliding along that edge of the template and bringing that bit of clay that I had at an angle, now perpendicular, but bringing that clay up so that there's this extra seam. Again, I'll kind of rock this together and just bring the two edges until they join. Oftentimes, the very edge here has difficulty curving. All of this, it's tied with what's around it, and so it just flows along. But the edge, it's only tied on one side, and so this side doesn't like to curve quite as much. So sometimes I found that like really hooking it with my fingers, kind of over curving, and then bringing it back out makes it so that it doesn't warp back apart. I've been talking a lot as I've been doing this. I'm going to add just a little bit more water to my join here. And then I'll bring the two edges together, making sure that I'm on camera. And then I will zipper them up just like I did before. Holding the whole form, trying to bring that edge together using the friction of this clay along my hand. All right. Sometimes it's nice to kind of leave the join a little bit like a teardrop, not super severe. Having that little tip allows me to then come back in, oh, here we go, with a needle tool or rib or something like that, and make sure I've got it on camera, kind of press in with that tool and press it down, and that fully joins that edge the rest of the way. All right. Again, I'm left with this boogery edge on the inside, setting it down on the table and doing a zigzag, kind of tap the seam down first just to make it a little bit less high, and then I'll go back and forth to smear it all together. All right, because this one's so small, I'm just going to go in with my thumb to compress the kind of bread texture, these like kind of wrinkly bits, all that. It's really, that stuff will want to cause warping. So you want to get as much of it erased as you can. But if it's in areas like where I've written here, the parts that are really important to get this smoothing, this compression, are the edges. So this rim here and the bottom rim, because those are really the least supported sections when this becomes a piece of just clay that doesn't have tar paper. It's not quite fully closed along this edge, so I'm going to try and really squeeze that clay out. So I want to make sure that these edges are fully joined. And I can just use my hands kind of cupping like you would on the wheel, holding it and pat, and rotate, hold, pat, rotate, hold, pat. I'm just giving a little bit of a compression to re-round this cone. Make sure it's nice and circular. All right. Now that's got me pretty much clean. I forgot to clean up this edge on the inside here. I want to make sure that really the rim of both sides, both edges, top and bottom, are fully smeared and fully joined, because they are really the kind of main areas that determine if it stays together. All right, so now this is ready. And now I've got my two pieces. My main goblet form has probably not fully dried enough to be stiff, but I've got a torch, so that's a-okay. Goodness gracious. Let me grab a cup here. So just grabbing a cup to kind of hold this in so it stands up here. All right, so it's nice and stable. And then I will come in with my cheese cutter here. I like to start, might not be able to tell it, but this is where the seam is. And I like to start just before it and hold my finger to support the seam so that I can glide. And then after that, I just rotate it, continue cutting along this template edge. And what I'm doing here is kind of beveling the rim just a little bit. Our lips don't come to a right angle when we open them or put them around a cup, they never really come to a right angle. So I've got it now to just a slight bevel, you can see. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to torch it so that this edge, this hard interior edge, becomes dried out, but the clay beneath it is still very squishy. And so what that allows me to do is keep this defined hard edge, but squish it down so that it's rounded, so that there's really this kind of like lead in little sharp edge and then bringing down. So this is that corner that I've cut right now. It starts like this. I'm going to squish it down to that. So bringing this back into center. I've got this nice torture. Let me move this out of center so I can have this torch in view. This is the kind that I like. I just use a propane. I like the camping propane containers because they have a nice broad base. Some of the like tall, skinny gas cans, they're not very stable. It's already not super stable as is, but this is a nice broad diameter comparatively. So that's what I use for gas, even though it has a slightly lower temperature. And then I like this head for them to start because it's just a nice click to get it going. Oh, sorry, I'm getting a back cramp as I'm standing here. Give me just a second to stretch. All right, so moving that back into center. And I'm just gonna torch this on the far side. I don't want to be torching on the exterior because that will cause me to torch my tar paper, which is paper and flammable, so not good. But if I'm doing it from this inside edge, this little bit of tar paper on the edge doesn't really seem to get effect. Oh goodness, that cramp's coming back. So I've not had any issues from torching on that side. But I am only torching just a little bit. Oh goodness, this cramp will not go away. Just torching a little bit to dry out this hard edge. All right, so now the hard edge is hard. And before it all homogenizes, I want to go in and squeeze and just pinch this edge, pinch the rim. If I don't do this immediately after torching, that edge is going to suck moisture back from the rest of the clay that it's attached to. And boy, I need some salt. And it won't keep that nice definition after I pinch it. So there's that nice defined edge. So now that I've got that, go and make sure it's as round as possible. And then I'll just torch it on the inside to stiffen it up. Just basically doing some TV cooking magic, skipping like an hour or so. And being sure as I'm doing this to make sure that the banding wheel is not ever stopping. I want to make sure that the torch doesn't stay in one area for too long, because that will cause one area to get too dry and then inevitably crack. So now that it's dried up a bit, oh goodness, this cramp. Now that it's dried up a bit, I can flip it back over onto its rim and start to peel the template away. And I do that starting from the tips here. Sometimes they get a little buried in clay, so I'll use the tip of a knife. Just kind of get under and lift that away. And I want to get all of these spikes lifted up first, and then I'll peel it away from the side of the form. Now that I've got that kind of flower bloomed open, I'll start to peel away from this edge, kind of separating the template from the clay. The template is stuck on, so this edge right where the seam is, the clay's really gonna want to stick on. So just kind of working my finger under this edge, kind of peeling it away. And then once that's pulled away, I can go back in now, and I do it on both sides, and go back in and just roll it off. And I like to do this while it's on the banding wheel, like I mentioned, because if I am kind of holding it, inevitably I put some tension or some torque somewhere, there's like some distortion from my fingers holding it, and I end up not keeping the knife on the bending wheel. It stays nice and round. So before I lift it up, I've got a little bit of work to do. That seam, that joined edge is right here in line with this line. Pardon me. And so I'm just going to take my rib here and swipe along it and smooth it out. And then once I have that, I like to just smooth all the way along the exterior, just kind of recompressing this slab into knowing that this is its form now, not a flat slab. It's a mug slab or a goblet slab. Then once I've got the main edge, I'll go in and work on the spike. And when I'm doing this, I just kind of work on one side of the triangle. So I'm working on the right side. And I go all the way around, right side, right side, right side, right side. And then I'll do the left side, left side, left side, left side. And I do that so that I'm repeating the same action. I kind of know how I have to move my hand rather than doing left, right. And my hand has to kind of change its mindset each time, except for this little burger. Just by doing it on the one side, I can keep the same action all the way around so that they're all uniform, and then I can do it on the other side. Now, I could work on the left side closer to me, like I was working on the right side here, but I like to swipe down. And this direction is really fluid for me, but going like this is much less fluid. So now I'm going to work on the left side, pulling towards the middle. So still going that same direction with my swipe, but working on the left side of this spike of each triangle rather than the right. Right. And then once I've got them all smooth, left and right, I'll go back and I'll use the rib to even it out into one flat plane, or one kind of curved flat plane. It's got a little bit of a swell. I just go in and do this to each edge. The area where this curve meets the cylinder form, there's always these little kind of puckers. So I like to use a soft rib on that area to kind of get a bend with my hand here and swipe along it horizontally to get all of those corners nice and cleaned. And then once that's done, I can go back on the side. All right. Leaves me with this cleaned up form. I'm distorted it a bit, but that's a-okay. I'm going to torch it just a little bit more so that it'll hold its form as I attach it to the foot. You can see how much moisture has kind of come onto this banding wheel just from the torching, because it is not an absorbent space. See, I kind of messed this up when I knocked it earlier. So I generally don't like to torch straight on the banding wheel. I like to get a piece of cement board, usually a little bit smaller than the board that I work on. And then that will absorb the moisture that's being steamed out. I'm quite haphazard with this rim, but trying to keep it somewhat round. Can even use my foot here as a kind of chuck to round out the rim, of using them to maintain that same round shape. All right. It's starting to get to the right firmness, but all the moisture from it being upside down still on the inside. So I'm going to kind of hold it upside down and torch it like this. Hopefully I can get it good on camera. The reason I'm doing that is to get some heat into the center here. If I'm just torching straight down, a lot of it bounces straight back up just from heat rising. So kind of holding it upside down allows me to get more heat in there so it's steaming. I can see steam brushing by my face. I don't know if it's coming through on the video, but just getting it firm enough that I can hold it and kind of move it around without it crushing. But it doesn't need to be quite leather hard. If it is leather hard, all the better. The more support it'll have within itself to stay together as I'm attaching the base here. All right. So now I've got my piece. Oop, don't want to knock that. And I want to make this edge just a little bit beveled to accommodate the bevel of my spiked bottom. And I could definitely come in with my cheese cutter here, but I have found that I really like to have, specifically for this goblet join here, quite a bit of extra clay. So just like I did on the side seams, the main seams, I'm going to kind of push that clay down with a serrated rib so that I'm scoring it and displacing it at the same time and making it into a bevel. So now this is beveled. It's got a little bead on the inside there, ready for my goblet. All right. Cleaning off my serrated rib before it gets dry so it stays nice and effective. And I'm going to go in and hydrate this seam. So I have that wetted, moisturized, watered, whatever. I'm going to just set my goblet top on, and I'm now looking at it. I'm sitting down and I'm looking at it from the side rather than from the top so that I can make sure that it is level. Like if the goblet maybe leans one way or another. And then I'm going to kind of press it down just a little bit and peel it away. And what that has done is left me with a monoprint of where I need to score. So I'll move that cone out of the way, set this down. And then I'm just, there's this spot, it's little 5 dots. I'm going to now connect the dots just by scoring from one to the other. You could also kind of do a little circle because I am attaching a circle to a pentagon. So there is a little bit of tension within that, but the clay is squishy and moldable, so that's not really an issue. And just dabbing on a little bit of water so that it sticks nice and well. Set that to the side and bring my cone back, right? And then I can go ahead and align it and set it on. I like to have this join on the foot not be in line with the join of the body, and ideally actually on the opposite side, so that puts it kind of in the middle here of this. And I do that because having it not be by another seam, it's this like singular piece, it's more held together. So I'm going to line that up, lay it on, rotate, make sure it's all nice and level. And then I will press it on. And now I'm going to work. Goodness, maybe it's a little bit more visible from the other side. Nope. What I'm doing is I'm going to press this seam into the flat edge. So turning this circle into a pentagon, it's really only doable when it's sitting on its foot. So sorry for the lack of view here. Maybe I can, yeah, there we go. All right. So just pressing that edge in so that it's, oh man, it's still just a shadow. So that there's not this wedge here. Let's see if I can get even better of a view here. Bear with me. Hopefully that's coming up better. This little wedge here, pushing it in, turning that curve into the straight edge to match. The template that has cutouts like this one, there's a lot of open area, a lot of negative space. And so the template is not super strong as this type of cutout. And so it kind of stretches and get some kind of distortion in the shape. So I kind of have to go in and kind of compress it and bring it back into the form. The solid shapes don't have that same issue because they hold themselves together. But once that edge is joined all the way around, I can go ahead and flip it over and work on the rim or on the inside of the foot. Just moving my camera back. Sorry about all the transitions. It'd be nice to have a camera crew, but sadly it's just me. And now I've got all of that extra clay in there that I can kind of press down, and that's not quite getting the angle. I can press down and smear into the form so that it's all really nicely attached and smoothed, and it looks like one piece of clay. My big hands out of the way so you can see. I'm just doing that all the way around. So what was a circle is now a really nice pentagon. I like odd numbers. You might notice on my shop there's a lot of pentagons. That's because I am the fifth of my 5-person family. So, just a little bit of fun number play, because why not? All right, and getting that inside cleaned up however I like it. All right. My hole puncher is missing, but this is when I would go in and add that, there it is, that dishwashing hole, that drainage hole. All right. Now from that, this mug or this goblet is pretty much ready. Oh, not quite. I'm forgetting to take this last template off. While it's upside down, I can go ahead and peel this away. Always so satisfying. And any kind of like seams or anything that don't look fully connected, I can just go in with this silicone nibbed brush that I have. I like the nice point, and just compress that join a little bit, smooth it out, smear it all together so that it is nice and well attached. Right, great. Do the same on this outside seam. And that's a goblet. You can see that the form itself is pretty simple. It's straight walled, tapered wall on the foot, but it allows you a lot of room for customization. Let's see what time it is. 6:44. So we are just past an hour. I'm gonna move this to the side here, get it out of our way, and clear up my space just a little bit as I get the next kind of things ready to discuss. All this stuff away and getting a box cutter. So I've got just a normal old box cutter, nothing special about this. I just like to use the box cutter blades instead of X-Actos when I am doing cutouts on my tar paper. Tar paper, it's tar and paper, and so it has quite a lot of tug. It dirties up your knives. So if you're using an X-Acto, it often ends up just breaking the tip of the X-Acto really easily. So what I want to do here is take my goblet form that is very straight walled, and I want to turn that cylinder from this to something more like this, right? Some belly in the middle here. Now, the way that I would do that, erase that, the way that I would do that is by adding some darts to my template. And, the templates that I sell are really great starting place because they give you some guidelines for those darts. If I make a line that joins all of the bottom bits, hopefully my needle tool shows up. And if I make, maybe another line a few inches down, so long as they're perpendicular, good to go. And then I'm going to draw a line joining from each of these kind of corners here, these pits, crevices, whatever the right word is here, and drawing perpendicular to the two horizontal lines. So kind of hard to tell how much it's viewable unless I bring it up to the camera, but now I've just got a grid on my piece here. What I want to do with this, oh, this will show up much better, great. What I want to do with this is cut out some little slivers of lemon. And by slivers of lemon, I mean that it's like a lemon shape that's really squashed into a sliver. That drawing didn't go super well. Line is too broad. But I just want to cut a little bit away at each of these points, and ideally doing it the same amount on each of them. So I like to do just like I did on cleaning up the point of the clay, doing all of the rights, doing the same action, and then doing all of the lefts and doing the same action. That allows me to basically just hold my tool and do a curve like this. Just repeat that action. Now, I don't want to cut too much away. Once you cut away, it's cut. So I would advise definitely starting with smaller darts than larger, and building up to a larger size. So like cutting it, putting it together, seeing how you feel about it. I do want this to be a separate piece here, so that this is like one long panel. So this is going to get cut out here for me. But that's definitely not necessary. You could take this dart and bring it up into the form, lifting up that belly, kind of changing the profile of it. But I like how that'll be. All right, and then I'm just gonna go in with my knife here, holding on the far side of the tar paper and cutting away from my hand. I'm gonna sit down to do it, so hopefully I'll stay in view of the camera. But again, just doing that same side on each of them, following the lines that I sketched out, and just going nice and slow. Like I mentioned, that friction of the tar paper can make it kind of difficult to flow a nice cut. So that's why it's important to go slow as you're working. Woo! There's that friction. I'm gonna go back in and just clean up that edge. But it's okay if these cuts are not perfect. Oh, goodness. Because, we're working with clay, and so it can definitely kind of squish around to fit. I've laser cut these so that they're as close as possible to being the shape, but you can definitely make an ovular goblet even though it's made for a round goblet. So there's definitely some freedom in this. And quiet for a moment so I can focus on finishing up. That's gonna leave me with this like gladiator belt looking kind of thing. But once it's all joined together and these darts are brought in, it's gonna give me some waist, a little bit of profile, some shape, some body yaddy yaddy on my goblet here. And by having that go all the way around, I get this really nice faceted goblet form. And that aspect of adding darts can be applied to really anything. It works really well on joining edges. But as you can see, you can do it on the insides of forms. So likewise on this cone, it could go from being, that's not steep enough, being something like that to being, let's get to a dry spot, something more like that, more interest in it. And so that plus a goblet top that has a little bit of curve there, you get a much more interesting form. So these darts that you can add in to customize really offer a lot of opportunity for form and for shape. So there's the customization that you can do within just a texture or surface. And then within that, there's also the customization that you can do for the form. All right. I feel like I've just been talking and talking and talking and talking. Well, that's all I've really got for this evening. Are there any questions? I can definitely switch back to me as a person. Might be a little bit more inviting. All right.
If anybody has any questions, go ahead and type it into the comments and Mike will answer them.
I'll make sure I have the comments. visible. There's one loading up. It's my pleasure, Shreya. My pleasure. All right, well. Oh, what kind of clay do I use? I use a red stoneware, Cone 6 red stoneware. So it's pretty chocolatey. It's not a commercial clay. It's just 50-50 red art and hawthorn. So if you go to the clay store or whatever you've got in your neighborhood and get a 50-pound bag of hawthorn, 50-pound bag of red art, put them together with some water. That's all I use. Nice and simple and easy. Cone 6-ish.
I have a question for you, Mike. What is the tool you use to smooth out your clay?
This one?
Yes.
I call it a mega scraper because I just think that's more fun. But I think the actual name for it is paint guard because it's used as like painters that spray, I guess. They'll like put it up and then like spray and it'll like protect with a straight. I don't really know. I'm not a painter, but that I think is what it's used for. Works exceptionally well for smoothing because it's got just a little bit of flex, so I can like really add some compression into areas that are maybe fighting me. But yep, that's that. Mega scraper.
Awesome.
And I offer the mega scrapers as well as the templates on my website. So if you don't want to go to the store to find one of these, I do sell them. Thickness of tar paper do I normally use? I hope there's not more of the question because I'm just looking at the kind of previews of the chats as they come up. I use the 30-pound tar paper, and I use that because my low relief at 30-pound is a nice thick lift, but at 15-pound, it's half the thickness and doesn't quite have the same read. That said, the 15-pound, if I was doing just something like this, where I was just trying to get a form, would work great because it'd be really flexible and I could get nice, soft, smooth curves. So I almost always use the 30, but there are definitely times for the 15 or where the 15 works great.
Any more questions? It doesn't look like it. All righty. Well, Mike. Oh, before you got here, have you ever wood fired your work from Charles?
I've wood fired my work once or twice, but I've never been super satisfied with the look on this particular series. I don't know. Oftentimes wood firing, there's so much added in the atmosphere and in the firing surface that unless it's something more solid shaped like this, something like this usually ends up looking too busy, at least for me. So don't often do too much atmospheric firing just for that reason. I like control.
So with that's going to be right here, real quick. This will be the last question. So would it be cool if I made a couple from this video and tried it out? I don't want to step on your style.
Oh, absolutely. Go for it. That's the whole reason I sell these. I started doing these templates in my studio a while ago and I realized just how useful they were for hand building. I got into ceramics despising hand building. I did not like really anything that wasn't on the wheel or with a mold. And this really kind of opened the door for me because it's really supportive in that way. So yeah, absolutely take it, run with it, however far, whatever direction you want to go. I will not be offended. Ceramics is so much about sharing of knowledge. It's so much open source information. Glazes wouldn't exist unless technology was shared. So yeah, absolutely take it. I won't be offended. I mean, if you
Absolutely.
start making this pattern, I might be like, hey buddy. But
Cool beans, thanks. I'll be sure to tag you on my Insta when I start making them. Absolutely love it. So
great.
with that, that's going to be the last question. Mike, you absolutely crushed today. Thank you so much for doing this workshop. I learned a lot, and I know everybody attended that learned a lot as well. The replay for anybody that was here or will be available either later today or probably early in the morning tomorrow. Thanks again, Mike. You have a great rest of your day.
Thank y'all. Have a good one, you as well.